Time. Changing things. Carrying the past away. Nowhere is time as full of ambition as in New York. But here, time has been contained. New York's decades, encased in wood, glass, and memory. Put up, allowed to age, kept and cared for in this place. Time, stored away and savored. Time, brewed and sipped like ale. Here, the ritual chores have changed little. The hurry-up of the last 130-odd years, ignored. The mopping and scrubbing, the cutting of the onions, the mixing of the mustard. Here, the sawdust is still scattered across the old wood floors, just as it has been every morning since 1854, when an Irish immigrant named John McSorley opened this place, and right from the first day, called it the old house at home. This is the way it has been since the beginning. Winter, summer, through the boom and bust and boom of New York. With America at peace and at war. On a perfect autumn afternoon, a contingent from New York's fighting 69th Regiment makes a pilgrimage to 7th Street to present a plaque to Mattie Marr, McSorley's owner, and to honor another piece of New York's history that has refused to die or to fade away.
It's a great pleasure on behalf of McSorley's for me to receive this. It will hang here forever.
Hopefully.
Forever. Things that last. Traditions that endure. Whether at home on 7th Street or in his native Kilkenny, tradition is something that Mattie Marr, another immigrant from Ireland, cherishes as scrupulously as John McSorley did.
I'm an American citizen, and I'm proud of it, and I'm a New Yorker, and I'm proud of it. I'm also Irish, and I was raised right over here, and I'm proud of that.
The story of McSorley's is a chronicle of Irish pride and a bit of Irish luck. Like the time 22 years ago when Mattie stopped on the Dublin-Kilkenny road to give a lift to a stranded tourist named Harry Kerwin.
I happened to ask, what part of America, and he said New York. And I said, New York, I don't know too much about New York. There's a few friends of mine that work over there. And he asked, what did they do, what line of business were they in? I said, they're in the bar business. Well, he says, I happen to own a bar over there. I said, these work in a place called McSorley's Old Ale House, and Jesus, he almost jumped through the roof. He says, I own the goddamn place. As the days progressed, I was chauffeuring around Ireland, or, the local areas, and I had mentioned to him at one stage about I better get back to work, and I said, if I don't, go back in, I lose my job. And he says, the hell with the job. He says, why don't you come to New York and you'll get yourself, or we'll give you a better job. And that started the conversation as the seeds of immigration were planted. My first impression, when I went into McSorley's was, it was interesting. It wasn't what I had believed it would be, but, I was hungover and what have you. But as a few days passed by, I began to become very attached to the place, and I could well understand, what I had heard and what people had said of it, that the character and the atmosphere and something that, you never even dreamed of was in America. You'd hear about it maybe in Ireland or something, but I hadn't seen anything like it. I became very attached to the place, and I was home away from home.
Home. The old house at home. Home. A destination. A remembered dream. McSorley's has been both these things in a city built on striving, reaching, and dreaming. The New York where John McSorley opened for business was just becoming the commercial capital of America. It was a city of unquenchable thirsts, a city whose wealth and future were built on water, on its harbors, its docks and piers. In 1854, it is already a rich, bustling city, with hundreds of banks and businesses, America's first department store, and a new word to describe its most successful citizens, millionaire. But it is a poor city, too, Of the 700,000 people in New York in 1854, more than half are crammed into tenements and shanties. It is a city of immigrants, millions of them pouring into New York in the years before the Civil War. Like John McSorley himself, many of these immigrants are Irish, refugees from the great famine and evictions that ravaged the Irish countryside. They come in a stream, and the stream becomes a river, and the river a great flood that changes the city forever. Most of these immigrants set to work laboring on New York's docks, hauling its goods, building its bridges, policing its streets, fighting its fires. A few set out to help this growing, hustling city quench its thirst. New York was a city of drinking establishments, some of them opulent palaces with tiled floors and copper fixtures, and humbler places for the working man, saloons and alehouses, like John McSorley's. Today, McSorley's is still a refuge for this city's working men.
Amen. That's the great thing about this place. I think that it is a hallowed ground, or kind of a bastion of that working man. You know, my father drank here. He was city fireman for 29 years, and that's a blue-collar profession. And he drank here in the 40s. And his father before him was a printer in the Printers Union, and he worked for the Fairchild Press, and he drank down here too. So, and before that, it's not documented, but I would say that my great-grandfather drank here. He was a longshoreman down in Lower Manhattan.
Well, you know he drank here, Bob. You know what I mean?
I'm just keeping up the family tradition. That's the way I look at it. You know?
And I would just like to imagine what it might have been sitting in this bar in like 1860, you know, no car exhaust, just horses clocking down the street.
Part of the McSorley tradition is tied to the building across the Bowery where in 1859 Peter Cooper, an inventor and the builder of America's first locomotive, opened Cooper Union to provide a free technical education to working people. Along with the Astor Library and the Opera House, and at the corner of 7th Street, directly across from McSorley's, the armory of New York's fashionable 7th Regiment, Cooper Union formed what was called New York's Athenian Quarter. In 1860, a presidential hopeful comes here to tell the country that a house divided cannot stand. Legend has it that after that speech, Lincoln crossed the Bowery to McSorley's, where Peter Cooper toasted the success of his speech.
Mr. Cooper's chair on top of the bar, I think that's a classic. To know that that was his chair, I think that's one of my little favorite things. It's just kind of funny sitting up there with chamber pots on it and all sorts of clay things on it, you know.
But the history, you know, that's all over the walls. I mean,
right,
you know,
exactly.
You find things like
Babe Ruth's signature,
yeah, Babe Ruth's signature,
FDR's signature, the fact that Abraham Lincoln, you know, sat here and had a beer is incredible.
Within 2 years of Lincoln's visit to McSorley's, the prophecy came true. The house divided and fell. America plunged into civil war. Across the street from McSorley's, the 7th Regiment mustered for war. From here, in April 1861, it marches south. Down the Bowery at Prince Street, the Fighting 69th soon follows. Among those soldiers are McSorley's patrons, some never to return, others to return, but never to forget. The battles of that war are fought far from McSorley's, and yet in the summer of 1863, the war comes home in the form of New York's draft riots, a week when mobs ruled the streets. The poor and working class, mostly Irish, sacked stores and homes, protesting the provision that allowed the rich to buy their way out of the draft for $300. The 7th Regiment is called back from Gettysburg and takes up positions along 3rd Avenue and the Bowery in front of McSorley's, its guns pointed east toward the slums. The Civil War changes America, and New York changes. In 1878, the railroads Peter Cooper helped set in motion come to the streets of New York. The fabled L's shackle New York's avenues and carry the city northward. As the city grows, richer and poorer at the same time, the power and promise of politics comes to dominate immigrant life. From their wigwam on 14th Street and from the back rooms of McSorley's and places like it, the chiefs of Tammany spin out the lines of patronage and loyalty. It is the politics of William Marcy Tweed who plunders the city treasury. The politics of the Irish chieftains who succeeded him. Honest John Kelly, Richard Boss Croker, Charlie Murphy, and Big Tim Sullivan, whose family lived on 5th Street, just 2 blocks from McSorley's.
My granduncle was Tim Sullivan. They called him Big Tim Sullivan. He was 6'6". He was a state senator. He was passed the bill of the Sullivan law, permit to carry a gun. And his brother-in-law, who was my grandfather, was the police captain down here. A cousin was the head of Tammany. It was like the Irish mafia down here. They gave jobs out. They paid electric light bills. Yeah, they did. My granduncle used to buy shoes and socks for all the poor kids downtown New York, twice a year. So, when he was 4, his father died, and when he went to school, he didn't have shoes. His teacher had to buy him a pair of shoes. So twice a year, he used to buy all the poor children's shoes and socks. Yes, they all came to McSorley's, sure. It was social, business, everything. It was a headquarters, like.
But politics wasn't the only entertainment in the vicinity of McSorley's. This was the Bowery.
The Bowery, the Bowery. They say such things and they do strange things.
A celebrated strip of music halls, dance parlors, dime museums, and clip joints. The Bowery of Harrigan and Hart, who were favored customers of John McSorley and who wrote a musical called McSorley's Inflation. Their music celebrated the Irish tenement life that surrounded McSorley's.
He owns a row of houses in the first ward near the dock, where Ireland's represented by the babies on our block. There's the Palins and the Whalens from the sweet Donaghadee. They are sitting on the railings with their children on their knee, all gossiping and talking with their neighbors in a flock, singing Little Sally Waters with the babies on our block.
And it was the Bowery of George M. and the 4 Cohans, of actors and dancers and vaudevillians. But amid all the song and music, John McSorley's son, Bill, becomes famous for his moody silences. With the death of old John in 1910, Bill succeeds. He bolts the pictures to the walls and announces that New York can go its wanton way, but the changes stop here at McSorley's doorstep. And that resistance to change becomes another permanent fixture in McSorley's.
In like today's like disposable reality, McSorley's is a sanctuary, an oasis. It's a place that I just really feel it connected somehow. There's some kind of continuity and history in this place that you can, you feel a part of something.
It has survived 132 years. It has an energy and a soul of its own. It seems to provide what it needs.
Well, with everything changing so rapidly, buildings being torn down that are 10 years old, and the hustle of modern life, it's nice to have something that's enduring, an institution, unchanging.
It's precious to me because there's nothing here done in order to win the customers in here. It's done because something was started about 100, 150 years ago to start putting these things up. And I get the feeling that just by doing little things that are consistent with what you want to do from a day-to-day basis makes tradition. And this is what happened here.
McSorley's tradition is an accumulation of small things. The ale, the onions and cheese, the daily rituals, the bits and pieces of history each person uses to mark a special attachment to the place.
Every so often I get up and I walk from picture to picture, you know. Nothing is exactly a favorite, But everything is interesting in here, no matter what you look at, is very interesting, and it goes back many years, just like myself. I'm 73 years old.
My favorite thing in here is the 1815 London Times over there about engaging Wellington at Waterloo, and about the battle in progress at that time.
The most important things are the things that are behind the bar, and that's the things that I like the wanted poster, the Abraham Lincoln assassination. There's an old musket, the picture of Babe Ruth. And then there's, on the side, not behind the bar, but on the side of the bar, there are these pictures of boxers that they were given on cigarette packs, like bubblegum cards, but these were given on cigarette packs.
I'd have to pick the gas lamp that hangs over the bar with the wishbones from the 1870s that they had decided back then never to dust. That's seniority, that dust.
Basically, those wishbones are a good luck charm. Leave a good thing alone, and it's always brought us luck.
My real favorite is the one of Franklin Roosevelt over there. It's an autograph that I think is probably a real rarity for Mr. Roosevelt. It's a double autograph. It has a letter underneath it.
If there's one photograph I like, it's of the McSorley 9, the baseball team, because there are only 8 people in any picture of the McSorley 9.
My favorite thing here is the Xavier letter behind the bar, because a friend of mine was on the swim team and gave it to them back in, I think, '71. So every time I come in, it feels like I'm home again.
Favorite thing? See that local 3 button up there? That's my favorite thing. Local 3? That's right, 3, buddy.
The American flag. That's it.
Way to go, man. Way to go. I like that.
There's one more thing, but you have to go from here to there. There's a pair of handcuffs that have the rail of the bar handcuffed to the floor. Do you see that?
How about you, Richard? Yeah, my favorite object is the lady over there on the picture on the wall there.
And if you come here, men and women, you have to see the urinals. It is a religious experience going to the bathroom here.
Oh, those shoes in the back. Who are they? Kennedy. Kennedy shoes.
Look at the stuff in this place. So this is just a regular bar. I met people from here that came from Chicago, Boston, and all kinds of, like around the United States, just to see how this bar really is.
I come from Germany, and I find this place. I bought a brochure, a newspaper in Germany. Yes, and here I read the oldest beer, or the oldest bar in New York. Therefore, we are here.
People continue to come here to savor the ale and the onions and the special pieces of tradition. But there is another part of McSorley's that has attracted a particular group of patrons. It is McSorley's light, a quality of light unique to this place, to its wide windows and the streetscape beyond them.
It's extremely direct, crisp, clean sunlight. It's a very nice feeling. And it only happens during a certain couple months of the year, and it comes right in those windows and cascades across these first 3 tables here and that first table there and across the bar.
There is something unchanging about the light, something that defines and continues to define McSorley's. And as the years passed, with most everything in New York torn down, rebuilt, it was McSorley's quiet insistence on being what it had always been that brought artists like John Sloan here. Sloan celebrated the light. He celebrated the legendary cats, 18 of them at one point, and the ritual of their nightly feeding by Bill McSorley. And he celebrated the customers, saying that he found in them, and in the mood of McSorley's, a thing called poetry. The poetry is in Sloan's paintings and sketches. It's in the words of the poet, Paul Blackburn, who described McSorley's this way. Silence there is, and 2 conversations, sometimes 3. The loudest sound in this public room is the exhaust fan in the east window, or the cat at my back, asleep there in the sun, bleached tabletop, golden shimmer of ale. Even Prohibition failed to change the light, or the shimmer of ale. Sloan's 1930 painting, McSorley's Saturday Night, captured the mood of that time, the light and motion undimmed by the nation's so-called noble experiment. Bill McSorley kept serving his steady customers, Some of the most loyal were the officials and police responsible for enforcing Prohibition. And when Prohibition ended, and Bill got too old to preside over his alehouse, he sold McSorley's to a retired policeman named Dan O'Connell. O'Connell was faithful to McSorley's argument with change, but the city around it wouldn't stop changing. The 1930s brought a harshness to the Bowery, and the streets around McSorley's became a dumping ground for the victims of America's Great Depression. McSorley's survived these changes, as it had survived all the changes before. And as the 30s ended, McSorley's passed from Dan O'Connell to his daughter, Dorothy O'Connell Kerwin. Like her father, she left the founder's rule unchanged.
But you had to swear to stick to the credo of the good ale, the raw onions, and no ladies.
And when, in those days, when a female would come in by accident or deliberately, the bartender would become very flustered. John Smith, usually, or sometimes Adam, and they would get all red in the face, and they'd say, "No ladies allowed," and they'd ring the bell. They have a bell behind the bar, an old pipe gong, I think it is.
I remember him ringing the bell, we're coming out behind the bar, and he'd give him a kiss on the cheek and tell him, "I'm sorry, darling, but there are no ladies allowed."
One poem that I remember and said, here's to the joy and bliss of a mug of McSorley's beer. It's not as sweet as a woman's kiss, but a damn sight more sincere.
But some forces were too powerful, even for McSorley's. In 1970, the 116-year-old ban against women fell, and news of it reached as far as Vietnam.
I heard when they let women into McSorley's, I was in Vietnam, and it made the Stars and Stripes. And we have a copy on the landing zone that I was at, and it just happened to, strike me. I guess nobody else, the rebels that were in the outfit knew nothing about it, could care less about it, but it kind of hit home when I saw it.
And it was a shame that they broke this place open. They did it to survive, and they did it with typical Irish grace and charm. I must say, if there was resentment, it was handled, I think, rather gracefully. But I wouldn't mind seeing it return to an all-male preserve, because men behave differently when women are around. They're much more full of nonsense. I mean, when a woman shows up, they start lying.
I think McSorley's arrived at a stage where women became a challenge, and I think it was a marvelous place to be able to absorb what it was presented with, because it wasn't prepared for a woman clientele in any aspects of the place. And I think, again, McSorley's provided what it needed at that particular time. We're still here.
Well, I don't know if it's all changed that much since women started coming in. As a matter of fact, there's some nice things to be said about having the ladies in. But then it was pleasant in those days, too. There was for a long time, after, ladies started coming in there, some of the old-timers didn't care too much about coming. It was always kind of a workers' bar, and then they got a little bit put out by having women in. But now they started to come back, so you're getting that nice mix of people again that we had here years and years ago.
I spent almost every afternoon for 4 years here while I was an undergraduate. I came to McSorley's for lunch and to write my papers in school. And in the afternoon, the only people who would be here when I would be here writing my papers were about, 10 or 12 old-timers, pensioners, guys on Social Security or retirement, almost all of whom were Irish, but a couple of Ukrainians and a Pole and a German thrown in. And they sat along the wall back here, and it was my great ambition then to get old enough to inherit one of the chairs along the wall.
They liked a good glass of beer, and the pot-bellied stove would be nice and hot of a winter evening. And what could be nicer than to huddle around one of those where there was no woman around, I might say. And it looked like they belonged, and they've been here for I don't know how many years.
During the day, some still come because things are much as always. Comfortable, familiar, quiet. But it is sometimes the fate of those who won't change that their success brings change of its own. At night, the crowds who come to touch McSorley's past seem, by their ambition and their numbers, to chase some of that past away. They make this a different McSorley's, with their line along 7th Street, with their noise and their antics and their energy. McSorley's seems changed after all. But who can tell? McSorley's has a strength all its own. And the clock on the wall continues to tick. Tick the hours away the way it did in the days of old John. Time contained the way it's always been. By McSorley's muted light. By the shadows and the memories. The same time as it's always been. At McSorley's.
Still ahead tonight, Linda Ronstadt and Maria Muldaur make music at midnight with Canada's singing McGarrigle sisters. Right now, stay tuned for an exciting musical reunion of a group who haven't performed together for 20 years. The Kingston Trio together again next at 10:30 here on 13.